routes, territories, and commodities each carrier was allowed to serve. Set minimum and often exact rates carriers had to charge. Approved or rejected rate changes submitted through rate bureaus. Prevented carriers from undercutting each other. Teamsters negotiated national master agreements, e.g., covering wages and working conditions. Enforced uniform rules so that drivers across companies were treated similarly. Prevented labour-based rate cutting by underpaying drivers' bids. They looked up a published rate. All rates were published in tariffs, which were publicly filed and legally binding. A shipper wanting to move freight would consult a tariff or call the carrier who would reference it that specified the charge for commodity class, value, fragility, stowability, set by the National Motor Freight Classification, NMFC. Weight class or break, origin-destination pairs, rate scales based on mileage or zones, accessorials, special handling, refrigeration, liftgate, etc. There was no negotiation. The rate was what the rate was, and all carriers in a rate bureau region used the same or nearly the same rate schedule. NAV 2.2, so what did carriers bid or compete on? Competition happened only in areas allowed by the ICC. A. Service quality, pickup delivery times, damage records, customer service, terminal network coverage. B. Availability. The main competition was often simply which carrier had the authority and trucks available to move the load at that moment. C. Special commodities or exempt freight. For freight, the ICC did not tightly regulate, e.g. agricultural commodities. Carriers sometimes offered flexible pricing, but still not like today's bidding wars. Number 3. What actually determined rates? You're right that value, weight, and distance were primary factors, but here's how they formally worked. 3.1 Commodity value, the class system. Freight was assigned an NMFC class from class 50, very dense, cheap, to class 500, very expensive, difficult to handle. Class reflected value. Higher value equals higher class, fragility, susceptibility to damage, density, handling difficulty, liability risk. Higher class equals higher rate. Number 3.2, weight rates declined by weight break. Minimum charge, £500, 500 to 999, 1,000 to 1,199, 5,000 to 9,999, 10,000 and up. The heavier the shipment, the lower the per hundredweight CWT rate. 3.3 distance. Most tariffs used mileage scales, origin destination rate cells within a region, zone systems in metropolitan areas. Longer distance equals higher absolute charge but lower cost per mile. HAT has 3.4 special factors: refrigerated loads, reefer surcharge, hazardous materials, seasonal congestion, terminal transfer fees, but all of these were fixed surcharges in the tariff, not negotiated. Number 4. So what was bidding in this system? Because the rates were fixed, bidding meant something very different. 4.1, carriers did not bid price. They bid service capacity or privilege to haul bar. You could think of it like open quote. You need this moved at the published tariff rate. Which carrier with legal authority and network capacity do you want to use? Close quote. Shippers often had contracts for fixed lanes, regular pickups, carload minimum commitments. These were contracts only for service, not for pricing. Now 4.2. For heavy industrial shippers facing large volumes, they didn't negotiate pricing, but they did negotiate. Guaranteed equipment availability, drop trailer agreements, priority handling, daily pickup schedules, credit terms. The ICC allowed these service contracts as long as the tariff rate was charged. NAMA 4.3 rate bureaus acted as collective bidding committees. Carriers would jointly submit rate adjustments to the ICC, so the closest thing to bidding happened at the rate bureau meetings, not between carriers and shippers. Number 5. How this ties into AFTRA-style modern regulatory structure. AFTRA, as you described it, mirrors the old system but replaces ICC rate bureaus with transparent federal oversight, Teamster wage enforcement with statutory fair pay floors, tariff filing with databased rate stability mechanisms, carrier entry limits with safety equipment/wage compliance gating. And most importantly, open quote, it prevents the race to the bottom in pricing and labor that deregulation introduced. Close quote. Want to go deeper? We can explore any of these next. A, walk through a real example of a pre-1980 truckload or LTL rate calculation. B, detail exactly how NMFC class determination worked. C, breakdown of how rate bureaus voted on rates. D. How carrier operating authority limited competition. E. How Teamsters staffing requirements influenced service levels. F. What exempt commodities did to the system.
Can you condense that down into a one-page summary and keep the core details there?
Here's a clean, one-page, tight summary that keeps all the core details about the GOT Act overtime concerns, the AFTRA $1 per mile standard, and what driver pay would actually look like. One-page summary: overtime, GOT Act, and driver pay.
Nope. I want to do a summary of what you just were talking about. Hold on one second. Let me scroll back up. I want a summary of the ICC Teamsters system before 1980, the big picture. Can you make that down to a one-page summary?
Here is a tight, one-page summary of the ICC Teamsters pre-1980 trucking system, keeping all the core details but removing the long explanation. One-page summary: how the ICC Teamsters system worked before 1980. From the mid-1930s to 1980, the US trucking industry operated under a regulated stability model built jointly by the Interstate Commerce Commission, ICC, and the Teamsters Union. The ICC controlled the economic structure of trucking, while the Teamsters controlled the labor standards. Together, they created a system with stable rates, predictable wages, and minimized destructive competition. Role of the ICC. The ICC granted operating authority, dictating which carriers could haul which commodities and on which routes. Carriers could not enter markets freely. Authority was scarce and valuable. The ICC approved all freight rates, which were published in tariff books and legally binding. Rates were standardized through regional rate bureaus, preventing undercutting or price wars. Service competition existed, but price competition was essentially illegal. Role of the Teamsters. Negotiated national master agreements such as the NMFA, setting uniform wages, benefits, and work rules. Prevented carriers from reducing labor costs to compete on price. Enforced consistent safety standards and working conditions across the industry. How loads were assigned, not bid in today's sense. Shippers did not request bids or negotiate pricing. Instead, they looked up the legally published tariff rate. A carrier's charge was determined by NMFC commodity class based on value, fragility, density, handling difficulty, weight breaks, heavier freight equals lower cost per hundredweight, distance, mileage or zone tables, accessorials, reefer, hazardous, special handling, etc. Carriers competed mostly by availability, reliability, damage records, and terminal coverage, not by price. Rate formation. Carriers participated in rate bureaus, which collectively proposed rate levels to the ICC. The ICC reviewed and approved or rejected these rates, ensuring stability and preventing destructive pricing practices. Because rates were uniform, truckload and LTL carriers earned predictable margins. Why the system was stable. No carrier could legally haul freight below the tariff price. No carrier could underpay drivers to cut rates because the Teamsters enforced wage standards. Limited entry prevented oversupply of trucks and drivers. The system avoided today's predatory pricing, churn, and volatility. What this meant in practice: freight markets were calm, driver pay was consistent, and companies planned long-term. Shippers chose carriers based on service quality, not who would haul cheapest. Drivers received strong wages and benefits because labor standards were uniform and enforceable. The industry had high barriers to entry, but low instability. If you want, I can now condense this further into half a page, turn it into a timeline, or rewrite it in plain language, policy language, speech format, or script format.
Excuse me. Heck yeah. Hey, what's up, whoever's watching? Just doing some studying here, learning about trucking.